A fateful family dinner in Dallas. My name is Jessica Turner, and if you had asked me before, I would have sworn up and down that my family was just like any other in Suburban, Texas. Imperfect, maybe, but close-knit where it counted. That illusion shattered one Saturday evening at my parents' house on the outskirts of Dallas. The night started innocently enough. I pulled into the driveway around 5:30, the sky still holding on to the last golden rays of daylight. My parents, Peter and Sandra, lived in a neat, two-story brick home lined with blooming crepe myrtles. The front porch light was already on, casting a quiet invitation. Inside, the house buzzed with the casual chaos of family tradition. Jazz music hummed from the kitchen radio. The aroma of fried chicken and mashed potatoes hung thick in the air, and the distant sound of Dad's laughter mixed with Mom's warm greeting as I set a bottle of wine on the counter. My husband David arrived right behind me, slipping his hand into mine as we made our way to the dining room, already crowded with the familiar clutter of home. Cookbooks, family photos, a school project from Melissa's daughter left from last weekend. Melissa, my older sister, was already there, and like always, she was swanning around the dining room like it was her own personal set. At 35, Melissa had built a name for herself as a social media maven. She breezed in on a wave of Chanel perfume and confidence, her perfectly curled hair reflecting the light as she fussed over her phone on a tripod. I barely got out a hello before she was barking directions. "Jess, hold the plate like this. No, higher. We need to get everyone in the shot for aesthetic." For as long as I can remember, dinners in the Turner house were noisy, slightly chaotic events filled with good-natured ribbing and inside jokes. But tonight, there was an edge to everything, maybe because the usual focus was off. Instead of catching up, we were posing, waiting for Melissa to approve a shot, to adjust the brightness, to check her angles. She treated us, her family, like props for her branded content. "Smile, everyone's watching," she trilled, snapping upwards of 24 photos before any of us had taken a bite. I tried to shake off the unease. Dad made small talk about the Cowboys quarterback. Mom passed a basket of steaming cornbread, praising Melissa's creative flair for capturing the essence of family togetherness. But it all felt staged, forced. The Turner family, filtered and cropped. David, ever the peacemaker, muttered under his breath, "This is dinner." I squeezed his hand, hoping to keep things light, but the longer we sat there, the more it felt like dinner was secondary, and the main course was Melissa's performance. It was strange, the things you notice in moments when everything's about to come undone. The flicker of Mom's eyes every time Melissa spoke, half worry, half admiration. The way Dad avoided the phone camera, trying to recede into the background. The clatter of silverware, the way time seemed to stall out every time Melissa demanded we reshoot a candid moment. I could feel the tension coil tighter. I tried to play along, but when Melissa asked me for the third time to fake laugh for her followers, something inside me bristled. I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. Stiff smile, posture too straight, eyes searching for something normal in the surreal circus around the table. Dinner dragged on, bites taken between photo ops. Melissa narrated the spread for her viewers, describing childhood favorites as if she hadn't eaten the same dish 100 times. Turner family secret recipe. She winked into her phone. Even though everyone knew Grandma had clipped it from a magazine, none of us knew what was coming next. The snap of tension, the explosion that would hang over us for months. I was only aware of the growing ache in my chest, the feeling of being unseen, relegated to the edge of my own family's story. By the time dessert appeared, Mom's legendary peach cobbler, now rearranged for the camera rather than for hungry mouths, I was over it. The air was thick with unspoken words. The lights from Melissa's phone, ring lamp buzzed hot and white, casting harsh shadows across faces that used to only show warmth. Looking back, there's a before and after. To that night, before, I thought there was nothing we couldn't overcome if we just talked it out. After, I wasn't so sure. But in those charged minutes before everything cracked open, all I wanted was a quiet night, a little attention, maybe even a real laugh. None of us could have guessed that one simple plea, asking for the camera to be put away, for reality to break through the filter, would set off an avalanche. All I knew was that Dallas never felt colder than it did in the silent seconds when the dinner table became a battleground, and the people I loved most in the world became strangers on the other side. The hidden cracks within the family. Growing up in the Turner household meant living in the ever-present shadow of my older sister, Melissa. As a kid, I spent years quietly striving to make my parents proud. Report cards lined with A's, never missing a curfew, and doing my best to fade into the wallpaper whenever Melissa's energy filled the room. Our parents, Peter and Sandra, had a soft spot for their firstborn daughter. Melissa, with her charisma and relentless drive for attention, seemed to consume all the oxygen in the house, leaving little for the rest of us. Family, at least on the outside, looked picture perfect. In every holiday letter, my mom described us as tight-knit, supportive, her favorite words. She boasted about Melissa's big wins, whether it was making cheer captain in high school or getting her first sponsored trip as an influencer. My milestones: accepting a college scholarship, making the dean's list, getting promoted at work, got polite, passing mentions, a congratulations, and a warm, if distracted smile, but never quite the same pride that radiated from my sister. This favoritism wasn't always obvious. It started small and quiet, the way Melissa would get the bigger slice of cake, or the seat by the window on road trips without question. My parents excused her outbursts as just being passionate, her mood swings as creative temperament. The tiniest accomplishments, her first YouTube video, a local magazine mention, became dinner conversations for weeks. If I ever dared protest, I was told, "Let your sister have her moment." But her moment never ended. When Melissa launched her career online, the household adjustments became impossible to miss. Suddenly, our living room turned into an off-limits filming studio on weekends. Family outings revolved around what she could document for her followers. Mom and Dad never complained, always offering support, helping move furniture, borrowing props, and beaming with pride whenever Melissa tagged them in a post. Sometimes, they'd even skip my events if they overlapped with something important on Melissa's calendar. My husband, David, recognized these cracks before I allowed myself to see them. He grew up in a quieter family, one where everyone had a voice at the table. He'd watch, sometimes in disbelief, when Melissa barked orders during family gatherings, while my parents scrambled to please her. There was the Thanksgiving she dominated every conversation with stories about a brand campaign, despite my attempts to announce my own promotion. Or the Christmas, where Mom abandoned baking cookies with me for Melissa's urgent content shoot. Whenever I tried to open up about how excluded and invisible I felt, my parents would wave it off. "She just needs extra encouragement," Mom would insist. "Be patient with your sister." Dad would back her up, saying, "Melissa always dreamed big. We have to help her succeed." No one ever asked what I dreamed of. It seeped into my adulthood in ways I never anticipated. I caught myself minimizing my happiness, apologizing for small successes, or fearing I'd come across as jealous if I told my truth. Meanwhile, Melissa's approval became almost a barometer for how my parents treated me, as if her opinion of my life determined my worth in their eyes. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I wondered if I was imagining things or being overly sensitive. After all, wasn't family supposed to be a place of unconditional love? But the pattern was unbreakable, and I had the quiet ache in my chest to prove it. Even the family dinner that night, what should have been a warm, normal evening, ended up revolving entirely around Melissa's wishes, with my parents trimming every interaction to suit her mood, her schedule, her camera. Looking back, I realized those cracks didn't just appear overnight. They were the product of years of choices, small and large, made in favor of peace and comfort, even if it came at the expense of fairness and truth. For as long as I can remember, I was the peacekeeper, the one who made excuses for Melissa's drama and my parents' blindness. But underneath that quiet surface, resentment and hurt were building. Each slight, each overlooked moment, another fissure running beneath the family's glossy exterior. What I didn't see then was that the foundations of our family were already unstable, and all it took was one volcanic moment to make every hidden crack painfully, irreversibly visible. The moment of anger, collapse, and heartbreaking silence, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted slowly, like dark clouds rolling in over a hot Texas afternoon. We'd made it through dinner, barely. Melissa's camera lights hummed a faint, monotonous drone in the background, drowning out what should have been the natural sounds of silverware and laughter. I watched as she directed yet another candid shot, her voice slicing through the static with practiced cheer. Every gesture, every word felt deliberate, curated for an audience not even present in the room. I could sense my own irritation bubbling just beneath the surface, kept in check out of habit more than anything else. Old reflexes. Don't cause a scene. Don't give her more material. Don't draw their attention. The scent of fried chicken and buttery mashed potatoes no longer made me hungry. Instead, it seemed to tangle with a bitterness rising in my chest. Melissa wanted dessert staged a certain way. She gathered Mom's peach cobbler, fussing over the angle, then gave me a command without looking up. "Jess, can you just move that napkin? It's ruining the vibe." That was it. A small thing, another request in a long line. But it was the thread that pulled a lifetime of pain loose. I looked at Dad, at Mom. Neither met my gaze. I felt the dam finally cracking inside me. Something I'd swallowed for years. Exhaustion, frustration, the sense of injustice was suddenly impossible to contain. My voice, raw despite my best intentions, cut the air. "Melissa, can you put the camera away just for tonight? Can we have one normal family dinner without turning it into a show?" It was quiet at first. So quiet that the clock ticking down the hall sounded thunderous. David stiffened in his seat next to me, eyes wary but supportive. Mom's fork lingered in the air, suspended midway to her lips. Melissa's head snapped up. Her expression caught somewhere between annoyance and disbelief. For a second, I caught a glimpse of the little girl she'd once been, demanding, fragile, desperate for attention. But in an instant, that vanished, replaced with the icy confidence she wielded like a weapon. "Oh my God, Jess, are you seriously making a scene? It's just a camera. It literally doesn't matter. Don't be so dramatic." She laughed, a brittle sound. I saw Mom dart a nervous glance at Dad,
Jessica, are
who
you
sucked
sure
in
you
his
won't
cheeks
reconsider the offer?
and pretended to check his phone.
Father,
No
we
one said a
discussed
word,
this. It's
not to
final.
her, not to me. I felt my hands trembling, a wave of shame and anger cresting at once. I pushed back my chair, the noise startling in the silence, and looked at Melissa square on. "It's not about the camera," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "It's about you treating us like props in your story. This isn't family, it's performance." She rolled her eyes, and with a gesture almost bored, as if swatting at a
The
mosquito,
merger should finalize
Melissa
by
reached
Q3,
across the
assuming
table
market
and
holds
slapped
steady.
me, hard. The
Pass the
sound,
Chardonnay, will you?
flat, sharp, echoed in the space. I felt the sting before I registered what had happened, a hot flush spreading across my cheek. No one moved. For 3 full heartbeats, the world held its breath. Mom gasped quietly, but set her fork down with a tiny, controlled click. Dad finally looked up, his face blank, his expression hollow. I wanted to cry, to scream, to demand why they weren't jumping to my defense. But my voice stayed locked in my throat. The humiliation, the rage, washed over me, mixing with the deeper, more dreadful realization. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Melissa had always lashed out when she was challenged. The only difference was that now she had an audience both in the room and online. I glanced at David, searching his face for something. Hope, maybe, or outrage. Instead, he was already standing up, the scrape of his chair loud in the stunned quiet. His voice was calm, cold steel beneath soft words. "You need to leave, Melissa," he said. "Now." Melissa stared at him, then back at Mom and Dad, as if daring them to intervene. Nobody did. Instead, Mom silently dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, blinking away tears that never fell. Dad's jaw clenched. Melissa's face warped with disbelief. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken, not by what she'd done to me, but by the lack of anyone leaping up to defend her. She grabbed her bag, her phone, and sophisticated lighting rig, still casting grotesque shadows on the table, and stalked out of the room. Her footsteps echoed through the hall. The front door slammed. For a while, nothing happened. I stood there, hand pressed to my burning cheek, trying to anchor myself in the present. Mom picked at an invisible crumb on the table. Dad returned to his phone. David came to stand at my side, his hand steady and strong on my shoulder. I tried to speak, to ask them why they always protected her, why it never mattered what she did to the rest of us, why their first reaction was to erase the ugly parts instead of healing them. But my mother beat me to it, her voice a brittle whisper, desperate for normalcy. "Jessica, maybe you should have just let her finish. You know what she's like when she's stressed." Dad chimed in, as though comforting a frightened animal. "Let's not make this into a bigger deal than it is, okay?" My heart cracked all over again. The betrayal was worse than the slap, worse than the sting or the embarrassment. Their silence, their excuses, felt like confirmation of every suspicion and fear I'd carried for years. I was invisible, unless I was a problem. I was expected to fold up, to duck the blow, to make it easy for them. David saw the devastation in my face. He gave my shoulder a squeeze. Then, in a firm voice I'd only heard from him at his most resolute, said, "We're leaving." He helped me gather my purse and coat. Mom tried to stop us with a fleeting, guilt-laden, "Honey, please, let's talk it out." But the words felt hollow. As we stepped outside into the cool Dallas night, the house behind us felt smaller, colder, stripped of all the warmth I'd ever associated with it. The silence between me and David in the car was thick. He didn't try to fill it with assurances or platitudes. When we got home, I finally broke down. The tears came hard and sudden, ugly with years of pent-up frustration and grief. David just held me, not saying anything, letting me shake apart in his arms. For days after, my parents called and texted. The messages all sounded the same. Don't make it bigger than it is. Melissa's under pressure. She's sorry, in her way. Let it go. Not once did they ask how I was feeling, if I was all right, or if I maybe, just maybe, deserved an apology. For the first time in my life, I realized the gap between the Turner family's glossy exterior and its wounded, unhealed core was a chasm I could no longer cross by myself. Their silence that night, and every night after, was not neutrality. It was a choice, one that broke my heart more thoroughly than any slap. And it was in that lonely silence, with David by my side, that I finally began to see. The only way out wasn't making peace or making excuses. The only way through was refusing to be erased ever again. Excuses and lingering pain. The days following the dinner felt heavy, as though the air in our small Dallas home had thickened with unspoken words. I moved through them in a haze, flinching at the buzz of my phone, bracing for my parents' next attempt to smooth things over or pretend nothing of consequence had happened. My cheek healed quickly, but it was the raw, invisible bruise inside that lingered, fueling doubts I'd thought I'd left far behind in childhood. At first, there was a strange numbness. I found myself replaying that night over and over. Melissa's dismissive smirk, the sting of her palm, the shattering silence that followed. What I couldn't shake, what crept into my bones, wasn't just the violence, but the way our parents' inaction felt like a verdict. Their comfort mattered more than my pain. Each time my phone vibrated, I hoped for something, maybe a gasp of recognition that what I'd experienced was wrong, even horrifying. What I got, instead, were hollow words and the same well-worn excuses I'd grown up with. It started with a text from my mother, Sandra. The morning after, my father, Peter, tried a different angle. His text read, "The more I read their messages, the more I felt myself shrinking back into old patterns. Was it really so wrong to ask for a normal dinner without cameras and demands? Hadn't I always been encouraged to keep the peace?" The Turner legacy, it seemed, was pretending everything was fine, even if doing so meant swallowing hurt until it festered into resentment. But this time, the ache inside refused to be buried. I drifted through the days, unable to focus at work, distracted during conversations with David, one half of my mind still in that dining room. Every notification made my stomach twist, especially when Melissa finally texted a tepid apology. David watched the unraveling closely. Some evenings, he'd find me sitting on the porch, shoulders hunched, thumb hovering over my phone as I read and reread my mother's latest plea. I tried to explain what felt unexplainable. The years I spent taking up less space so Melissa's light could shine. The way our parents' love for her seemed to swallow all the warmth in the room. The aching, lifelong longing to be seen, not as a problem or an afterthought, but as a person worth defending. Some nights the doubts crept in, unbidden. Maybe I had provoked her. Maybe all the pressure she was under really did make her lash out. Maybe I was blowing things out of proportion. The word overreacting echoed both from Melissa that night and then my mother's voice. A tidy summary for years of feelings I was never allowed to name. I questioned myself at every turn, my thoughts looping. Did I deserve what happened? Was silence really better than speaking up? David, unwavering, refused to let me sink. "You can't make yourself smaller just to fit the Turner version of peace," he'd say, holding my hand as if he could anchor me to dignity. I wasn't sure I had left. They're good at ignoring hurt, Jess. Especially if it doesn't belong to Melissa. That's not on you. At work, I wore long sleeves and a fixed smile, drifting through meetings with a stiffness I couldn't explain. My boss asked if I was feeling well. I lied and said I was fine, just tired from a family dinner. It was only with Amanda, my closest friend since college, that I started to crack. "It's not that she hit me," I whispered one evening when Amanda stopped by with takeout and a bottle of wine. "It's that it meant nothing to them. Nothing changed. They still cared more about not upsetting her than standing up for me." Amanda listened, biting her lip, never rushing to fill the air with platitudes. When I showed her the texts from my family, she winced. "You're not crazy," she said firmly. "You deserved someone on your side. That's the bare minimum." Amanda's support was like oxygen, but my parents' continued evasions suffocated me. A week after the incident, my mother called again, her voice sugary sweet with forced cheerfulness. "Honey, you know your father and I love you both. This will blow over. Sisters fight. You're both too sensitive, that's all." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask if she'd feel the same if someone else had slapped me. If I was ever going to be anything more than collateral damage in Melissa's story. It became clear that the only peace my parents wanted was quiet at any cost. The more I pushed for acknowledgement, the more uncomfortable they seemed. The Turner family had always been good at hiding messes, at sweeping conflict under the rug, and painting over cracks with Hallmark card statements. This was just the latest, ugliest proof that denial was their chosen armor. Melissa, meanwhile, continued posting online as if nothing had happened. Best brunches in Dallas, how to stage perfect family moments, and blessed with captions about the power of forgiveness. It was all theater, every post gaining likes from followers who bought into the persona she had crafted. I wondered if they'd recognize the girl behind the filter, the one who turned her own sister into collateral for a photo op. Sometimes I scrolled through the comments, letting the digital applause amplify my isolation. Strangers calling my sister an inspiration, applauding her for rising above negativity. Each heart emoji glanced off me like a slap. None of them knew what had really happened. Nights grew colder. My parents' house, once a place I could escape to, now felt like a distant country. I stopped returning calls. David began planning weekends just for us. A drive north, walks by the lake, brunches far from familiar faces.
It's worse than we thought.
I tried to rebuild routines, but the Turner family's silence followed everywhere. A weight in my chest that wouldn't lift. I learned, over those weeks, that pain expands in the dark. Excuses don't heal wounds. They only deepen them, teaching you to distrust your own memory, your right to ask for decency. I realized I had been holding on to a vision of family that had never really existed. Not for me. The lasting hurt wasn't Melissa's fury, or even the slap. It was the story my parents clung to, that their peace mattered more than my pain, that loving us both meant refusing to see the harm. In that space, I finally understood that the only way to heal was to stop waiting for their permission. My pain was real, whether they acknowledged it or not, and no excuse could soften the blow of being invisible in your own home. It was this slow, hard wisdom, a clarity bought at great cost, that pushed me toward something new, setting boundaries where none had ever existed before. For the first time, I believed I deserved better. I would no longer accept excuses as substitute for love. And in the cold aftermath, even as the pain lingered, a quiet new strength began to grow. The buried truth and the resolve for justice. A few weeks after the dinner, as my parents' texts turned from pleading to passive-aggressive silence and Melissa's Instagram continued curating her flawless life, I began to feel something in me shift. The ache of betrayal and neglect refused to fade. But it was evolving. I didn't just want to heal, I needed answers. If my family couldn't give me honesty, I would get the truth for myself. It started on a rainy Thursday, when Amanda, my closest friend for over a decade, sent me a screenshot in the group chat. Melissa had posted a carefully staged photo of herself on Instagram, eyes misty, wrapped in a knit blanket, a perfect image of fragility. The caption read, "Sometimes family drama hurts the most. Healing takes time. Grateful for those who lift me up," followed by a flood of prayer hands and heart emojis. Beneath the crafted surface, I felt a punch of anger. There was no mention of the violence, her selfishness, or the pain she left behind. Melissa had spun herself into the victim for thousands of followers, and, predictably, they ate it up. Comments poured in. "Stay strong, Melissa. Haters gonna hate. Nobody's worth your peace." The more I scrolled, the more surreal it felt. Amanda's follow-up text cut through my frustration. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You shouldn't let her get away with this." The next evening, I called Amanda over. As we sat on my couch, sipping tea in the comfort of real friendship, I confessed how empty my family's home now felt, how helpless I was against Melissa's performance. Amanda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've seen Melissa pull this before. Remember sophomore year, when she got in that shouting match with her roommate and somehow convinced everyone else the other girl was the problem?" A memory emerged. There had always been fights swept aside, apologies faked, consequences dodged through charisma or excuses. I wondered, was this really the first time? Or just the first time I'd refused to play along? Determined, I reached out to my cousin Rachel. She was 2 years younger than me, a nurse in Dallas, and had always seemed to live on the edge of a family gatherings, watching more than participating. I called her on a quiet Sunday afternoon. "Do you remember anything odd about Melissa?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel hesitated. Then, as I pressed gently, stories began spilling out. "Honestly, Jess, Melissa's always been like this. You remember that 4th of July picnic? She shoved me into the pool, screaming because I got her shoes wet. Uncle Peter told everyone to settle down, and Aunt Sandra made me apologize for overreacting. I was 12. You were there, but I think you were helping your mom in the kitchen." Her retelling shook loose more memories. Birthday parties where Melissa cried if the cake wasn't cut her way. Sleepovers that ended with her storming upstairs if the attention drifted to someone else. Our parents always made excuses. She was sensitive, creative, needed extra love. I wondered how many others bore small private scars like mine. Moments when their pain had been dismissed for the sake of family harmony. I started reaching out to other cousins, careful not to sound accusing. Several remembered instances of Melissa's temper. Paula, our quiet cousin from Houston, texted. After our Christmas dinner in 14, she cornered me in the hallway and yelled about something I said at the table. She even shoved me against the wall. Your parents told me to let it go. The more I listened, the more I realized my experience was not an anomaly, but a pattern, one carefully papered over by my parents' insistence on protecting Melissa's image. The thought left me rattled, angry, but also motivated. My family had built a fiction and forced me into silence. But I wasn't alone. Amanda pressed me to act. "You could tell your story, Jess. Document it. The truth matters." I hesitated. There was the fear that confronting Melissa publicly would only escalate things, maybe even damage me further. But silence had already done so much harm. Instead, I decided to gather evidence, to make sure the next confrontation wasn't just about my word against Melissa's curated persona. I asked Rachel and Paula if they'd be willing to write down what they remembered, even just emails. Amanda, with her signature boldness, offered to be a witness. She'd seen Melissa's temper firsthand and had a sharp memory. Next, I began combing through Melissa's own social media footprint. Most of her captions were sanitized, but a few old posts caught my attention. Rising above negativity is how I build strength, you're unbothered. Or, sometimes people you trust let you down the most. What at the time had sounded like generic influencer content now rang differently. Signals of a pattern, victimhood, deflection, never accountability. One sleepless night, I revisited group photos from previous family holidays, side-eyeing each snapshot. In so many, I was at the edge of the frame, smiling, but distant. Melissa was always at the center, in posture, in spirit, surrounded by my parents' unbending affection. A breakthrough came when Amanda reminded me of an incident from high school, which I'd tried to forget. During winter break, Melissa exploded at me over a misplaced sweater, hurling insults and slamming my door. I remembered apologizing, even though she'd been the one yelling. Amanda had been there, sleeping over, watching with wide eyes as my mother excused it. Melissa just gets frustrated when things aren't perfect. Thank you for being understanding, Jessica. Fueled by all this corroboration, I became more resolute. If Melissa tried to paint me as unstable or dramatic, I would have support, not only from Amanda, but from years' worth of quietly endured truths. Reached out next to my father. We met at a coffee shop. He arrived nervous, clutching his thermos. I asked him, point blank, "Dad, why did you never stand up for me?" He looked away, stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. "Your mother thought it was best if we kept the peace. Melissa, she just needed more help. I guess we thought we could fix it by loving her harder." For a moment, age weighed heavily on him. "I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention." His remorse was real, but it did little to erase the pain. What I needed was recognition, a willingness to stop hiding, to name what had happened. I told him what Rachel and Paula had shared. He didn't seem surprised. That night, my resolve finally hardened into purpose. I would not erase myself any longer for their peace. If Melissa refused to acknowledge the truth, and my parents kept hiding from it, I would bring it into the light for my own sake, and for anyone else yet to find their voice. The next morning, I drafted a lengthy email, compiling my recollections, those of my cousins and Amanda's. I sent it not just to my parents, but also to Melissa. "You have hurt me and others, and our silence has only protected you," I wrote. "I will not be silent anymore. I am asking for an apology and for the truth to be acknowledged, privately or publicly. If you choose denial, so be it. But I won't let this cycle dictate my life." Hitting send was terrifying, but also liberating. As the days went by, with no reply, just more Instagram posts from Melissa, more platitudes from my parents, I realized true justice might never come from them, but in bringing the story into the open, in gathering the truth and refusing to hide. I had already begun to reclaim something I thought I'd lost: my agency. No influencer's post, no parental denial could erase the voices I'd gathered or the history I'd finally chosen to give shape and meaning. The scars Melissa left were real, and now, so was my resolve. Confrontation and the legal turning point. The digital silence following my email felt louder each day. I'd dropped a stone into the still waters of our family's fiction, and now I watched the ripples reach the edges. My parents said nothing. No calls, no messages, not even a half-hearted attempt to dispute my words. Melissa meanwhile, maintained her online facade, serving up curated glimpses of her life as if nothing had happened. But the quiet was a gathering storm, and deep down, I sensed something more volatile was coming. It came a week later in the form of a controlled, chilly confrontation. Melissa arrived at my front door, unannounced, late on a windy Thursday evening. Her makeup flawless, her expression guarded. David intercepted her before she could barge in. He simply nodded for me to come to the door and stood close, a silent presence of support. Melissa wasted no time. "Do you have any idea what kind of mess you're making?" she hissed, eyes unblinking, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "If you go around telling these stories, you'll ruin not only me, but the family. Do you even care what it does to Mom and Dad?" Her words pinched like claws. In her mind, I realized, she was the victim. All the apologies and evidence I'd gathered meant nothing in the shadow of her image, her control. What stung most was the way she twisted everything, making my need for truth sound like an act of betrayal. "I'm not making a mess, Melissa," I replied, steadying my voice. "I'm asking for honesty. You can't keep hurting people and acting like it's their job to pretend everything is perfect." She scoffed. "All I ever wanted was for us to look like a real family. Did you ever think what all your complaining did to me? My career is real. If sponsors find out about this, it's over, and it'll be your fault." David, recording the conversation on his phone, something we'd agreed on after talking with Amanda, stepped in. "This isn't about business. It's about your actions and about Jess finally standing up for herself. You can't rewrite what happened." Melissa's jaw tightened. "You're siding against your own family. Great. Don't say I didn't warn you." She stormed back to her car, slamming the door so forcefully it rattled our windows. The confrontation left me shaken, but stronger. There was no doubt in my mind. I was done letting shame silence me. But 2 days later, I received a certified letter, a cease and desist from Melissa's lawyer. The document threatened a defamation suit, accusing me of spreading lies and attempting to damage Melissa's brand and income. The letter warned me against further public or private disclosure of disparaging fabrications, tossing in legal jargon that made my stomach twist. For a moment, I felt the urge to retreat, the familiar panic that had shaped so many of my childhood choices. How easy it would have been to fold, apologize, and let Melissa's version win again. But this time, I pushed back. Quiet, persistent David didn't hesitate. He told me, "You need a lawyer, Jess. Don't let her scare you back into silence." Enter Linda Harper, a friend of Amanda's who specialized in family law and workplace harassment. Short, sharp, with fierce blue eyes, and a reputation for unflappable strength, Linda wasted no time. She listened to every detail of my story, not just the slap or the years of dismissal, but the manipulations threaded through my family history. "People like your sister," she said, reviewing the recordings and witness statements I'd collected, "count on secrecy and intimidation. The law's not on her side. Truth isn't defamation. And if she pushes you, we'll push back hard." Linda drafted a careful, thorough response. She included the audio recording of Melissa's threats, statements from Rachel and Paula, and explanations of past incidents. Each piece of evidence was assembled like armor. I could feel my anxiety harden into resolve as Linda's letter went out. The next week was a blur of uncertainty. Melissa's lawyer responded again, but their language had noticeably softened. They suggested that perhaps the family could resolve this amicably, and floated the notion of a private mediation instead of a lawsuit. My parents, finally breaking their silence after weeks of resentment, called one night, both of them on speaker. Their voices sounded weary, brittle. "Jessica, can't you let this go?" my mother pleaded. "We're being torn apart." Melissa's heartbroken. "She says you're out to destroy her. Your father and I just want peace." It was the same all over again. Requests for calm, for avoiding embarrassment, for swallowing pain to safeguard appearances. This time, though, I didn't back down. "You never asked what she did. Only what I've done by telling the truth," I replied quietly. If family means anything, it has to mean accountability, not just hiding the mess. The mediation didn't happen in the end. Linda made the stakes clear. Any further harassment would be met with counterclaims and, if necessary, a restraining order. We also requested Melissa withdraw her accusations publicly if she truly wished for peace. Predictably, Melissa fell silent. She stopped posting for almost a week, the longest online absence she'd had in years. Her managers, seeing the risk of controversy, severed their relationship with her. I later saw emails Amanda forwarded me from mutual acquaintances. Melissa's reputation as difficult and unstable was quietly gaining traction. On social media, the tone of Melissa's return changed. She posted apologies so vague they almost vanished. Sometimes life tests us, and we all have lessons to learn. Before quickly switching back to sponsored content, book recommendations, and healthy recipes, the likes and comments dwindled. Some followers noticed the shift. A few even reached out to me privately, sharing their own stories of being bullied or shamed by someone who hid behind a mask. Not all consequences came at once. My parents remained distant. In their eyes, I'd chosen to betray them, exposing the lie of Turner family unity for the sake of my hurt feelings. Amanda and Rachel, though, became partners in my new normal, checking in, steering conversation away from toxic nostalgia, and reminding me daily that accountability wasn't cruelty. For the first time, the reality of boundaries took root in my life. I realized I didn't need my family's agreement to validate my truth. What I needed was strength to uphold lines I'd drawn. No answering Melissa's calls, letting texts from my parents pass unread, refusing any invitation that arrived with caveats or conditions. The legal threat Melissa wielded had backfired, exposing her tactics and breaking the last illusion that she could control the narrative indefinitely. She'd lost management deals, seen her social following decline, and watched relatives slip away rather than defend the indefensible. My parents, confronted with the real consequences of years of enabling, responded the only way they knew: retreat and denial. But for me, the legal turning point was also an emotional one. I discovered a core of self-worth untouched by their disappointment. No apology had come, and likely never would. But I had protected myself, refused to surrender my story, and found allies willing to join me in the light. The peace that followed wasn't simple or sweet, but it was real. The peace of no more hiding, no more excuses, and no more fear. Awakening, letting go, and starting anew. It's strange how pain can feel both heavy and clarifying, like water washing over stone, until only the strongest parts remain. In the months after the legal confrontation with Melissa and the final silence from my parents, my life felt stripped, a tree losing leaves in a storm, bare but quietly hopeful. I expected to be lonelier. I expected the ache inside me, deep and raw, to consume every hour. Instead, in that stripped-down space, another feeling began to take hold: freedom. At first it was awkward. Habits don't unmake themselves overnight. For years, I'd shaped my days around what would please my family, how I might stay small enough not to disrupt the Turner family narrative. Now, the rules had changed. There were no more invitations to Sunday dinners or holiday texts with the subtle expectation to let everything go. My phone was silent except for notes from Amanda and Rachel. Simple, honest check-ins. It was mid-autumn in Dallas, the air crisp and gold. The old me would have dreaded how the Turner house always seemed busiest then, with forced family joy and even more forced forgiveness. But as October bled into November, I realized none of that was my responsibility now. Even David, my steadfast partner, seemed to sense the atmosphere shifting. He arranged quiet breakfasts, found new walking trails for us to try, and listened as I hesitated and stumbled through the story of everything I'd lost and everything I was learning. Letting go of my family, even when they'd made me invisible, was not the easy, cinematic moment some imagine. It was gradual, more a practice than a moment. The urge to scroll through Melissa's social feeds, to check if my parents posted photos with vague, cheerful captions, still flickered in weaker moments. Sometimes I'd see comments from old family friends saying how blessed the Turners were, and feel a pang of old longing. What if, after all, I'd misunderstood? But the evidence stood. When I demanded respect, I'd been met with fear, dismissal, and silence. In that space, I forced myself to examine my history, not as a set of accusations, but as something to grieve. Amanda called it recognizing your losses so you can choose your future. I mourned what I'd never had, parents who would have protected me, a sister who could own her faults, a home where my voice was welcome. Sometimes I cried for the child I'd once been, always making room for Melissa's fire, quietly stepping aside. The healing took real shape in ordinary moments. I took up running, pounding pavement in the early mornings, breath clouding in the chilly air. I found myself savoring silence, not as punishment, but as restoration. David and I cooked together, laughed more. Our dinners messy, unfiltered, the kitchen table covered in sauce stains, rather than staged for photos. Weekends became ours in a way I'd never known. Naps on the sofa, long walks by White Rock Lake. The dog trotting ahead with abandon I envied. Work, too, shifted. For years I had compartmentalized, afraid to let colleagues see past my always ready smile. But a new kind of honesty crept in, slow and steady. When my boss asked gently about the changes in me, I didn't hide. I told her part of what had happened, a family rupture, a new start, and she listened, quietly supportive. Amanda encouraged me to go further. I signed up for a writing class on personal narrative, tentative but intrigued. There, with strangers, I started to find a voice I'd packed away, a voice that did not excuse itself, or shrink, or wait for approval. The therapist I finally found reminded me, letting go is grief, not failure. It's an act of self-respect. Some sessions were hard. Breaking the old Turner script in my own mind took time. Sometimes I still felt guilt, imagining my parents' aging years without me, wondering if Melissa would find absolution, fearful I'd ruined what little family we had left. But relief slowly outpaced guilt. I realized my heart hurt more staying than it ever would in leaving. Through Amanda and Rachel, my circle quietly grew. They introduced me to new friends, people whose families had frayed in other ways, through silence, addiction, secrets. It was humbling to discover how ordinary fractured families were, how universal the ache for recognition. We swapped stories over late-night coffee and early brunches, laughter bubbling up alongside tenderness. They never demanded forgiveness before I was ready, never doubted my right to distance. In this honest company, the shame that once clung to me like a shadow began to slip away. One evening, Amanda brought a stack of old photos. "Which ones feel real to you?" she asked. We sorted through holidays and birthday parties, searching our faces for authenticity. Most photos staged, Melissa always at the center, my parents beaming. But then, a snapshot from college, Amanda and me in thrift store hats at a picnic, sunlight slanting across our faces. Happy, unguarded, another of Rachel, quietly rolling her eyes as Melissa held court at Thanksgiving. The moment real and tender, a silent alliance. I started to realize that family could be built, found, and reshaped out of truth, not just blood. The more I released my grip on old hopes, the more space I found for new pursuits. I organized a book club with David and our friends. No one interrupted, everyone listened. Rachel visited more often. Amanda and I toyed with the idea of co-writing an essay about family mythologies, honesty, and finding home elsewhere. I found myself sleeping more soundly, no longer bracing for critique, no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. As Thanksgiving came and went, I ignored the Turner group text. The guilt, though present, was lighter now, a passing cloud instead of a storm. Instead, David and I hosted Rachel, Amanda, and a few friends for an improvised meal with mismatched plates and laughter loud and unselfconscious. There were no cameras, just moments of real connection, gratitude, and peace. Sometimes Melissa's shadow flickered at the edges. A tag in a viral post, a rumor through mutual acquaintances that her career had flatlined, that she'd moved in with our parents, more irritable and isolated than ever. My parents never called. The ache surfaced some nights. Regret, worry for them. Mostly, though, it softened into compassion for my own journey. Letting go didn't mean forgetting or erasing my history. It meant giving up the hope that those who'd hurt me would one day transform. Awakening wasn't a flash of clarity, but a gentle, persistent decision to honor my own reality. I stopped bargaining with their silence and started investing in my own laughter, my own comfort, my own sense of family. The future felt uncertain, but also finally, fully mine. I enrolled in another writing class, started planting herbs on our tiny patio, took awkward, joyful selfies with Amanda on lazy Saturdays. I learned the names of neighbors, joined them for porch coffee, let the world in where once I had kept it out. Looking back, it's clear. I didn't set out to become brave. I just got tired. Tired of shrinking, tired of making room for others' stories at the expense of my own. Now, standing in the light of my own small, steady hope, I see it was never too late to claim this truth. Real family, chosen or found, would meet me where I was, not where I was supposed to be. And so, in shedding old loyalties, in braving the silence, I began again, not as the Turner family's peacekeeper or scapegoat, but as myself, worthy simply by standing tall.
Keep your voice down, they are watching us!
I can't stand looking at that thing.
He deserved it.
We just need to get through the night, then we are safe.